charged to do it, committee. Because you're
Yeah.
going to act as the president.
Joe was going to.
What I'm saying is, it's like,
He doesn't.
no, council is acting, is asking the president to act in its.
We tried to send this Saturday.
Okay.
I'll explain it all.
Exactly.
But they do, they seem to
My
do
homeboy away all the time.
She's gluten free. You take her to the
Because
I
of
know.
your time.
Good luck.
Right, it's an emergency. You can't send it all the way. I mean, most of the time,
I
it's just like this.
I told you I know.
Right.
Going forward.
Not that we don't want
Wrapped it
it.
and then we went up to the line and they're looking at me and I said, she's gluten free. She can't
So-
have the thing.
Okay, ready for a countdown? Jump.
I'm gonna have the zoning amendment.
Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting of Wednesday, December 17th, 2014. Can I have the roll call, please?
Salem Derby.
Present.
Dan Hagan.
Present.
Jennifer Hayes.
Here.
J.P. Kuzinski. Joe McCoy.
Here.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Tamara Smith.
Here.
Joy Winnie.
Here.
Nathan Ziegler.
Present.
Okay, can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
December 3rd, someone have a motion, a second for approval of the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining.
One abstention. Okay. Communications from elected officials, boards, and committees. Councilor Rist.
Yes, we have two communications. The first is that the planning board did approve by a vote of 3-0 to recommend that the Paul Street extension be accepted as a public way. This is already in our Public Safety Committee. Second is the PARAC report. The amount to be for the fiscal year 2016 appropriation is listed with a lot of data. For your information, no action is required on either of these correspondence. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I think we can move on to reports of standing committees, and that's Mr. Councilor Rist again.
I have no report this evening, Mr. President.
Okay. Finance, Councilor Hagan.
I have two public hearings I'd like to set. The first would be, and I'll do them both at the same time in the form of a motion. I'd like to set a public hearing for our January 7th meeting to take up the request from the retirement board to increase their COLA base by $2,000, and also a public hearing on an interdepartmental transfer of $13,000 for a shortfall in the streetlight budget.
Second. Okay, a motion and a second to set a public hearing for January 7th, 5:30 p.m. for both the topic relating to COLA increases as well as shortfall in streetlight budgets. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstain? Motion passes.
Everything else on the agenda, I believe, will be taken up tonight. There's several public hearings, one on a city ordinance amendment, 3 supplemental appropriations, and 1 interdepartmental transfer. Those will all be taken up at the public hearing starting at 6:15. And as far as the next meeting is concerned, I'm not sure. I do not believe we'll probably have a subcommittee meeting next week, given the holiday. So it may, we only have one other item on our agenda, and I think, in talking with one of the department heads, I think we can move that into January.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes. I assume. Public Safety, Councilor Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to set a public meeting to amend the traffic rules and orders for the all-night parking for the 2 public parking lots. And I would like to set that for January the 7th, please.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to set a public hearing for the amend traffic rules and orders, section 130, no all-night parking. Any additional comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstain, motion passes.
We have the request for the street acceptance for the Paul Street extension. We're hoping to meet with Jim Gracia at our next meeting. Like Mr. Councilor Hagan said, I don't think we're going to be meeting next week, but it'll probably be the following week afterwards. And we have a review of the street acceptance protocol still moving forward.
Okay, and that concludes?
That concludes.
Okay. Appointments, Councilor Winnie.
Thank you. We met tonight at 5:30 to review the 7 mayoral appointments. 6 of the 7 are reappointments. It was unanimously 3-0 voted on that we move forward to the full city council to appoint the 7 appointments to their committees. So I will make this in the form of a motion that the City Council appoint Jerry Rauscher to the Agricultural Commission, all with the term of expiration of December 31st, 2017, except for one, and I will read that one off differently. So Matthew Wisdom to the Board of Health, Nora De Jesu to the Historical Commission, Cynthia Stefan to the Commission on Disability, which is term of expiration is December 31st, 2015. Eric Wojtovitz to the Conservation Commission, Gail Cannon to Development and Industrial Committee, and John Lacito to the Manhattan Rail Trail Committee.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for those mayoral appointments. I was in the Appointments Committee, and I welcome Eric to Easthampton. He comes from Belchertown with being an associate member on their Conservation Committee, so will be a great addition to our Conservation Committee. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion passes.
We have 2 more mayoral appointments in our new business. Would you like me to do that now?
Sure, you can move those now.
Okay. So I'd like to move the 2 mayoral appointments to our next meeting, which will be on January 7th at 5:30 in Conference Room A.
Okay. So we have a
second.
Okay, motion and a second to move the 2 mayoral appointments to Appointment Subcommittee. Any additional comment or question? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion passes.
And that concludes my report tonight, Mr. President. Thank you.
Ordinance, Councilor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. We did meet last Wednesday on December 10th, where we discussed all of the items on our agenda. One of the things that we did discuss was the zoning amendment consideration for building size provisions, which at this point, in the form of a motion, I would like to accept as a council to review, as a subcommittee to review that particular item as it's been presented, and also send it to the planning board.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to, is this moving it to committee?
This is moving it to committee.
Okay, this is building size provisions?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Move it to committee as well as send to the planning board the zoning amendment consideration relating to building size provisions. Any additional discussion or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstain?
I'm abstaining because I'm going to recuse myself on that issue, so I'll abstain on this vote.
Okay, except one abstention. Motion still passes.
Okay. And we also reviewed the other items on our agenda, and we have not come to any resolution on those. So we will be meeting after the new year. The date to be determined, it's looking to be probably the 14th, but that's not finalized yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Keep us posted on those meetings. I made an error. I just realized I skipped over our mayor report, our mayor communications, Mayor Cadger. Nothing? Okay. Okay, thank you. Property, nothing for property. Councilor Ziegler?
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have any report tonight. Unless you think we have time, I can go forward with the easement request.
Yeah, we have time. Sure, that'd be a good time to do this.
Under new business, there's an easement request between the city and the owner of the former Waterworks building property. We all received a letter in our mailboxes from Attorney John Fitzgibbon requesting that we look at this, address it tonight because it's time sensitive. There's some grant funding involved. It's to lay some power lines. The city's requesting to lay some power lines to the fish ladder, I believe to operate a camera, if I remember correctly from the letter. And Attorney Fitzgibbon's requested that we move it forward tonight at tonight's meeting, as the grant funding will expire, I believe, as of December 31st. So,
Okay, I know we have some, I think I saw city engineer, Jim Gratian, would you like to come up and just fill the council in a little bit on the project and the monies involved as such?
Good evening. Do you have questions about the easement itself that I can answer?
Stuck my foot in my mouth on that one. Yeah, are there any questions? I guess, this will be one question for you. Just, do you know how this happened, how this delayed to this point? I know the council obviously wants to be as helpful as possible, but there's always a little bit the issue of why at the last minute, and we have to move something that we typically don't do. Do you know where this might have fallen through the cracks?
We started the process for the easement. We started negotiating for the easement back in the end of the summer, the idea of providing the easement. At the time, we didn't know if we had enough money to do all the work required, and it turns out we did. So we proceeded with the new owner of the waterworks building. He was very agreeable to working with us to do it. We got to the point where we needed a plan of the easement in order to document it. That took a couple of weeks in October. And then it got turned over to the city attorney to work with the owner's attorney. That went back and forth for a while, and pretty much it finally got settled.
Okay.
The owner has signed the easement, so he's agreed to grant us the easement. But it's a matter of, and also the city attorney at first felt that this council did not need to sign the easement because it was being granted to us, but the owner's lawyer felt that the council should sign it, so that's where we are tonight.
Okay. Any additional questions, Councilor Rist?
Mr. Gracia, there's no money involved in this? In other words, we're not paying for this easement, or are we?
We're not
like on a
paying for
yearly
the
basis?
We're not paying for the easement per se. We paid for conduit and a meter panel and some other electrical materials
Of course.
that were required to get from the pole, which is on the right-hand side of the property, all the way over to the dam where the stainless steel box is with the video equipment.
So this gentleman is granting us an easement out of the kindness of his heart so that we can access the fish ladder with this electrical and other utility.
In a sense,
It's $1.
he did previously purchase. He did previously purchase the materials for himself to use. We are going to share them. We're buying. So we reimbursed him for the materials, and then there's some work that his electrician has to do. So we are paying him. We are reimbursing him. It's not for the easement, but it's for the materials that he had already purchased, and we'll be paying his electrician.
Oh, no, you.
And as I understand, that's roughly what the 2,000 to 5,000 range is. Is that right with those numbers? I think
The expenses we reimbursed the owner was $2,350 total.
and that's the money that by passing it tonight, federal funds will pay for instead of coming out of the city coffers.
Right. Now, all of the money that's going to be needed to power up this line to the fish ladder is coming out of the grant. There's no town money coming out of the grant, coming out of this expense.
Councilor Hayes,
I'm coming into this late. I know when we initially sold this property, I wasn't on city council, but I thought there had been some language in there about whomever bought that property, about the public still having access to the water further down where it pools as far as like fishing or anything like that. Does this kind of negate any public access to?
It doesn't negate it, but the public access that was granted to us was just for overland travel. It didn't include underground power.
So this is unrelated?
So this is
Okay.
separate from that. We still have access to the water behind the building, and we have access to where the parking area is at the fish ladder at the dam. But where the existing power pole is on his property, and it's not within any of our easement area.
Thank you.
additional, Councilor Hagan?
Just, you've answered a couple of my questions while you were answering the others about the funding from a grant, number one. And number two, whether they were underground or above ground, I'm assuming by conduit and mentioning their underground wiring. Because we are responsible, I would assume, going forward for any repairs of that underground line. I mean, that's our responsibility, correct?
Well, the overhead, it goes overhead from Northampton Street to a pole at the top of the driveway to another pole down toward the building. From there, it goes underground to the old Waterworks building, which was the records room. There's a little alcove on the end of the Waterworks building that was the records room, plan file room. The meter panel will be installed there. The way it's set up, the conduit from the pole to the meter panel and the wire in it is the responsibility of the power company. We're paying them $1,345 for that part of it. From the meter panel on the building to the fish ladder is our conduit, and we're responsible for that. That's 1 inch, a single 120 volt line.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Cadger, do you have anything more to add? No, you just covered it. Okay. So again, this is not typical of how we move. You know, typically these things go to subcommittee, but we found, obviously, in our charter, there is 2-9 allows us to move with a unanimous vote to move something tonight. So the first, I'd like to make a motion to move this tonight, and we need a unanimous vote in agreement of that. Could I have a second for that motion,
Second.
please? Okay, a motion, a second. So all those in favor of moving this tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Okay, motion passes unanimously. So now, secondly, Councilor Ziegler, if you'd like to read your motion for the easement.
I move that the city council execute the easement agreement between Mr. Jamie Jeffords and the city of Easthampton, under which Mr. Jeffords will grant the city an easement which will allow the city to install and maintain power lines to the fish ladder at 39 Northampton Street and facilitate the operation of cameras at the fish ladder for the sum of $1 on terms as specified in the easement agreement, which has been presented to the city council.
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second to accept that easement. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Motion passes.
Mr. President, I'd like to move the public hearings be
Okay.
open.
Councilor Ziegler, that concludes?
That concludes.
Okay,
I apologize.
That's all right. So we have a motion to open the public hearings.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion, a second, open public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Public hearings are open. So the,
They're all,
it's all finance? Okay. Finance, Councilor Hagan.
First public hearing tonight is a city ordinance amendment, and what it is in our city charter, in the first year after a municipal election, it's the responsibility of the city council to review elected salaries of elected officials and also multi-member boards. So this has been on the finance agenda for most of the year. We spent several meetings gathering information of other communities, trying to make comparisons of what other city officials, mayors, city councilors, school committee are all making in other primarily Western Mass cities, but also some Eastern Mass cities of smaller size. At the conclusion, we came up with a factor of, we felt while we've been in a recession and the funding hasn't been great, that the one position that is a full-time position that we felt was the mayoral position should really warrant a cost of living, because whoever holds that mayor's position, and I want to reiterate, it was not the current mayor that asked for this, it was strictly action of the city council. But whoever holds that position, it's a full-time position, that is their job, and it's a lot of hours a week in their full position. By the same token, I think we felt some of the other, like city council and school committee, are part-time, and maybe we could wait on any type of increase for them. So the only one that the finance subcommittee recommend raising was the mayor's salary, or the mayor's position salary. And how we arrived at the $5,000 that's proposed tonight was, in all the COLAs we've given to most of the other city employees, be it pay planning people or some of the unionized people, while we've had some years of zeros and some years of 2s and 3s, it's averaged out around 1.5%. And so going back and doing the math a little bit over the 6 years that since we raised the mayors, it would be actually under 1.5% for the mayor over those amount of years. So that was kind of the reason that we came up with the 5,000. So that's sort of like the base for it, and certainly I think myself, Councilor Kwasinski is not able to attend tonight, but certainly myself or Councilor Risk could answer any councilor's questions, and certainly the public's, any comments from the public.
I will start with anyone, just from order-wise, anyone from the city would like to, city administration, whatever, like to come and address the council concerning this. Appropriation, none. Okay, now anyone from the public who would like to come in front of the council and address concerning this change in the payment plan? Okay, not seeing anyone. Counselor Hagan?
I guess,
Unless-
other than other councilors, any questions from other councilors? Okay, hearing none, I'll make the following motion then, that the city council approve the proposal to amend City Ordinance Chapter 2, Section 2-16, mayoral salary to read as follows. The annual salary of the mayor of Easthampton shall be $75,000 effective January 2nd of 2016.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the changing of the mayoral salary to $75,000 effective January 2, 2016. Counselor Rist, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Councilor Hagan. This is 8 years by the time it's in operation that we've changed the mayor's salary. It is less than 1.5%, actually. It's like 1%. And it's not about, I just want to make sure the public understands this. We are charged to do this for the next mayor, not our current mayor. Should she win re-election, fine. But it is important that the people understand we're not immediately giving the mayor in office a raise. And I thought that was important to state. We looked at all the other positions, and we decided that given our council part-time position and part-time position of the school board, for instance, that this was the only and deserving full-time position that needed an increase, given that it's been 8 years since it was done, and I fully supported it at the time. Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments or questions concerning that? Yeah, I echo both of them here. I think it's long overdue. And just to kind of reiterate, this is for 2016, so whoever the mayor he or she shall be. So there was no certainly internal pressure for any of this. So there is motion a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion passes.
Our second public hearing tonight, in fact, the next three are all public works projects. And bear with me 1 second here. We'll go to the first one, which is, it's $6,162 to upgrade the gas meters for generation at the highway department. And what I'd like to do is a second reading on that. This is dated November 13th, 2014, supplemental appropriation. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $6,162. It is to be appropriated from free cash in that amount and appropriated to the DPW highway equipment and supplies. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds to upgrade the gas meter for the generator at the highway garage. Superintendent Pipchinsky's here, and I guess before we invite the public to speak, I think he could probably fully explain it. It's my understanding that we already have the generator. This is a matter of getting the metering so that we can run the generator, if I have it right, Superintendent.
Yes. Good evening. I'm Joe Pipchinsky, the Director of Public Works. We have the generator there, and when we originally called the gas company to find out if the gas line was big enough to supply the gas for the generator, they said yes. And then when they came to look at it, they said, but the meters aren't, so they had to upgrade the meters. So this was kind of something that kind of took us by surprise. Otherwise, it would have been in the appropriation for the purchase of the generator.
Any questions for department head? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the council concerning that appropriation for the gas meters? Please come to the podium, state your name and address. Okay. Oh, ma'am.
I would just like to say that with the generator already in place and now getting them hooked up, it's really important, especially during the winter season. So if we were ever to be without power, that the highway department and the DPW can be assisted in having power with the generator there. So I think it's really important to get this going.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? City officials like to comment? Okay, thank you. Councilor Hagan.
I'll then make the following motion, that the full city council approve the supplemental appropriation of $6,162 and appropriated from free cash to the DBW Highway Equipment and Supplies for the purpose of providing an upgrade to the gas meter for the generator at the highway garage.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the supplemental appropriation of $6,162 from free cash to equipment supplies. Any additional discussion or comments? Councilor Winnie?
All I want to reiterate is, I think I said this when the mayor put forth the appropriation to buy the generator, it was so important that we get that in place because it was very difficult when we had the storm a few years ago, the ice storm in October, and our police and fire and emergency vehicles couldn't get gas because our pumps weren't working because we had no electricity. So I think this is a very worthy appropriation, and it's for safety reasons as well as emergency and so forth. So I absolutely am in favor of this.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Our third public hearing tonight, and I'll do a second reading, is as follows: the supplemental appropriation from October 20, excuse me, I'll do this one first. The November 13th, 2014 supplemental appropriation. The amount requested is $9,255, and is to be appropriated from free cash, and that amount, $9,255, and appropriated to the motor repair equipment account. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to fund the purchase and installation of a vehicle lift for motor repair. In the hearing, I know the mayor spoke, and I've subsequently spoke to the director of Public Works, and what has happened is some of our vehicles now are of such a size that they needed a bigger lift to actually get them up. So I guess, again, I'd see if the superintendent would like to come up, director, and just speak to his need. Again, I think it's something that they do a great job repairing our vehicles and keeping them running, because I know we're always trying to Band-Aid them together so we don't have to buy new ones. So.
Yeah, Councilor Hagan is absolutely correct. We have one lift there now, but it is not capable of lifting some of our one-ton trucks, and we have several of those, and this would facilitate working on them much safer, much easier. We plan on keeping the other one to continue to lift the police cruisers and smaller pickups that we have, but we need something to lift the larger trucks.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to comment for the council concerning the Mayor Ketcher?
Again, this is another safety issue. I visited the motor repair, and they showed me how they have to maneuver the one they have. So this is definitely a necessity, a safety issue, and I'll be happy to see this happen.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the mayor? Okay, again, anyone from the public? Okay, Councilor Hagan.
I'll make the following motion: that the full city council approve a supplemental appropriation of $9,255 to be appropriated from free cash to the motor repair equipment to install and purchase a vehicle lift for motor repair.
Before,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to say that on the pink agenda sheet, it says 9225, and then on the paperwork given to us, it was 9255.
Is that
That's a typo.
Okay, so the
Mine-
white form is correct?
Yeah, the white form is,
Okay, thank you.
the white.
Wait.
Which number is that one?
9255.
Okay. 9255.
55.
Okay.
And you read that, obviously, number?
I read this number.
And
Second.
There
I
was a
think there was a
second, yeah, I
motion.
think-
We need a second.
Right, motion and a second, and now any additional discussion or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Our third public hearing tonight also is a supplemental appropriation. This one is dated October 28th, 2014. I'll do a second reading. The amount requested is $18,845 and appropriated from enterprise retained earnings, and that amount, $18,845, and appropriated to sewer capital trailer, $18,845. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds to the Sewer and Water Division to replace an equipment trailer that was purchased in 2002 The trailer is now rusted and in need of repairs that will exceed the cost of a new trailer. The new trailer is a 2014 Rogers 20-ton capacity tag-along trailer. In subcommittee, there were 3 quotes provided. I did follow up a little with the director about, in here it talks about one offering us a trade-in of $1,500 on the old one, but I believe it was sold for approximately that much at our salvage sale, because the old one was totally rusted out, so this is obviously something that's needed to continue the Water and Sewer Division's work.
Okay. Director Pipchinsky, do you want to make any more comments on that?
This is essential to our Water and Sewer Division. We need to move our tracked excavator around while making repairs to our water, sewer, and drains, and the only way we can do it is with a trailer this large. We don't have any other piece of equipment within the DPW to do this. To continue to use our excavator, we would have to hire a contractor to come in and move it for us. So this is something that we need to have.
Okay. Any additional questions for the director? No? Okay, thank you. Mayor Cadre, I won't forget you this time. Okay, now you're fine. Okay, anyone from the public who would like to comment to the council concerning this appropriation? That being seen, Councilor Hagan.
I'll make the following motion that the City Council approve supplemental appropriation in the amount of $18,845 to be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings. In that amount, $18,845, and appropriated to the sewer capital trailer to provide the funds for the sewer and water division to replace its equipment trailer that was purchased in 2002, which is a Rogers 2014 20 capacity tag-along trailer.
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second, to approve the supplemental appropriation of $18,845 from enterprise retained earnings to sewer capital trailer fund. Any additional comments or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Our final public hearing tonight is a interdepartmental transfer, and I'll do a second reading on this. This is dated November 5th, 2014. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $1,360, and it's to be transferred from the reserve fund, and that amount, $1,360, and transferred to the city planner professional services. The amount requested be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for an updated zoning map for the planning department. I believe anyone who has been to many of the either planning board meetings or zoning board meetings, our last official map, I believe, and I know the planners here can speak to it, I believe our last official map goes back to like 1995, and I believe we do have updated maps that, or at least an updated unofficial map, and I think this is an attempt to actually put together an official zoning map, a current zoning map, which obviously I think is long overdue or well needed. So I don't know if the planner would like to come up and...
So as you know, our zoning map is outdated. It was last updated at town meeting in 1995 when the zoning was overhauled. The zoning was hand-drawn on a roads map that was created by the city engineer in 1990. So it doesn't have parcel lines on it, it's just boundaries on a roads map. It can make it difficult to interpret where these property lines lie. Since 1995, City Council has amended the zoning map at least 11 times, and so there's at least 11 parcels on the zoning map that have the wrong zoning at this point. As we've gone through this exercise, City Clerk was gracious enough to give us all of her files from the past several years so that we could input them onto the map. We have right now a digital version of the map that's part of our GIS system, which is online on the website. We can work with CAI Technologies to update the map. They have some base layers that they were able to pull off Mass GIS, and I was able to get some information from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. So they have at least some base layers. It's a matter of tweaking those base layers so that they're accurate. The money is needed because no updates have been done since 1995. Once we now have it up to current zoning, every year, the annual update, if there's any future zoning amendments on parcels, that will be incorporated in the annual update that CAI Technologies does. So this is really $1,300 to bring it up to an accurate map. I do want to note that as we were going through this process, there were some questions in terms of the delineation, looking at the city council files versus what the zoning map from 1995. So our intent is to go through a public process. We don't need to, since you've actually already adopted all of these zoning amendments publicly, but since there are some lines that have some questions to them, I'd like to make it a public process and at least notify people that we're clarifying some of this line work and to have the opportunity to comment on it. It's not our intent to change anything. There is a section in the zoning code that does speak directly about when there's uncertainty with respects to boundaries of any district, and we've followed these guidelines in terms of making our determination on where we believe the lines need to be. But we do want to make it a public process, and we intend to do so. But right now, we need to just get the map updated so that we can go forward with that public process.
So the $1,300 is actually for Cartographic Associates, and it's going to be a digital map, so it can obviously much more easily be amended when things change.
Correct, and we would have a hard copy, we could have a PDF copy that people could download off the website. They could also access it with the online assessment system that we have on our homepage, which is really helpful. If people want to look specifically at their property and be able to pull up the zoning map, they're able to do that, and they would have an accurate information. Right now, we have a little notation saying, this may or may not be accurate, you need to check with us. So, we're just trying to cover ourselves.
Exactly. Thank you. Councilor Hagan?
You've answered part of my question, but I guess I want to go back to this version that's going to be online right now. If there's individual landholders that dispute or have a difference, don't believe it's accurate in this public process, and they can provide some type of documentation showing that they, in fact, it's different, how would that work? I mean,
that we'll have to make that part of the public process. I mean, it's going to have to go through a public hearing process like any other zoning amendment. It's just a spatial representation of our zoning. So it'll be the same public hearing process.
There would be opportunity for a landowner, if they saw something on a map, to at least make the...
And that's why I want to make it a public process. I certainly don't have to make it public. I think that given the way that the zoning is written, that it provides us with the ability to interpret how we believe the boundaries need to be interpreted. And given that you've already amended several parcels, 11 of them, since 1995. There's really no need to go through a new hearing. I want to be transparent about it, and I just think that's the fair thing to do, is if there's a property line that's shifting, I think property owners should have the ability to comment on that. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so part of this process, will there be notification of the people whose parcels could be questionable, so they're aware?
Yeah, I have to figure out exactly how we're going to go about notification. Typically, we notify by postcard and mail. With any other permitting process, we'll probably do something like that. It's just going to be a matter of figuring out who's getting the postcards, and that's going to take us some time to figure out once we get into the meat of this process. But we can't even begin all of this until CAI at least provides us with the base map to be working off of, and that's what this money is for.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions or comments for City Planner? No? Okay, thank you. If there's anyone here from the public who would like to address the council concerning the appropriation for the updated zoning map, please come to the podium. Okay, not being seen. Councilor Hagan?
Okay. I'll make the following motion that the full city council appropriate money for this interdepartmental transfer of $1,360, and it be transferred from the reserve fund in that amount, $1,360, and transferred to the city planner's professional services to provide funding to update the zoning maps for the planning department.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second, to approve the interdepartmental transfer of $1,360 from reserve fund to the city planner professional services. And additional discussions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Mr. President, I move the public hearings be closed.
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second, to close public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, public hearings are closed. Good point. We just noticed there was something missing from our agenda. We forgot to public speak. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to address the council concerning topic other than what we just covered in public hearing? Okay, nothing saying, okay, so we can move on now then. We have some additional new business, a snow emergency. Councilor Hagan?
Yes, we've been informed by the DPW that we're already in a situation where our snow expenses are to the point where we're going to need to declare a snow emergency. We do this every year, and it's always done early, but I guess in speaking with the director, a lot of what happens is they use salt and that down in the budget at the end of last year, and then this is, as the new appropriation comes up, they spend a lot and replenish the salt supply. That's one of the issues. So what they're saying here is that they've been, the snow expenses through the week of December 14th was $54,000, which only leaves $31,168 in their budget, and they already have outstanding bills of $30,288, which only leaves them a balance of $22,000, which obviously we'll need to address before the next snow falls. I don't know if it's not really a public hearing, so I don't know if anyone has questions for the director, or I can just read the snow emergency like we've done every other year. So, okay. I'll make the following. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31D, the Easthampton City Council, in conjunction with the approval of the mayor, hereby authorizes the emergency expenditure of funds for the continued removal of ice and snow in the city of Easthampton during fiscal year 2015, and further that a majority of the Finance Subcommittee be authorized to approve snow emergency warrants as necessary.
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second for approval of the declaration of snow emergency. Any additional comments? I'll make one comment. This is, I was new council, it was confusing to me. The reason why snow maintenance, whatever, is not included in the budget is that then it just limits us to a certain amount. The state allows a snow emergency for the city to run in a deficit as far as these expenses go, and so then it gives us a flexibility to pay off it later than as we happen to go. So that's usually why we do declare this for the new councilors. So any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion passes. I think you have another one.
Yes. The next matter is under new business, is a supplemental appropriation, and I'd like to do a first reading on this. It's dated December 11th, 2014. The request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $17,500, and it's to be appropriated from free cash, and that amount, $17,500, and appropriated to capital highway gas heaters, garage heaters, in that amount, $17,500. The amount is requested to be used for the following purpose: to replace non-repairable and non-functioning gas and water heaters at the highway garage. And I would make in the form of a motion that this be sent to the Finance Committee for review.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, to move the supplemental appropriation of $17,500 to finance for additional review. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Mayor Plummer, stubbornness, and so Councilor Hagan will have you try to discuss that.
The last one, I bear a little, the council bear with me a little on this. The reason I asked to have this put on the agenda is it's very time sensitive if we are going to act. And what this involves is a recent ruling by the Zoning Board of Appeals overturning a building inspector's decision not to issue a building permit for what he considered to be an electronic messaging center. And the Zoning Board of Appeal has chosen to overrule his denial and allow that building permit to either be issued or appealed. And I generally don't read from something, and I'll try not to, but it is a little bit just this has been ongoing for several months, and I'll just kind of bring everybody up a little to speed. This involves the mobile station on Northampton Street, which went to as I said, back in September, they went to the building inspector for a building permit for an electronic sign. At that time, the building inspector did turn them down, as he felt the sign was requested was an electronic messaging center as defined in our ordinance, which was drafted after a very lengthy process, as I'm sure Chairman of Ordinance Derby will attest to. The applicant then filed for a special, when he was denied the first time by the building inspector, the applicant filed for a special permit to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals felt the sign was what they call a changeable sign, and after discussion with the applicant, he withdrew the special permit request and again asked for a building permit from the building inspector. Again, the building inspector refused to issue the permit. The Zoning Board of Appeal then held an appeal hearing of the building inspector and reversed his decision. I have not had a chance to talk to the building inspector since, although I have tried, because in prior conversations, I'm not sure he felt he wanted to necessarily have a desire to challenge the Zoning Board of Appeals if they went against him in court. Given the window, there's only a 20-day window of an appeal of a zoning board decision like this. And that's why I brought it forward in an emergency thing, and that the decision, to my knowledge, with the clerk hasn't been filed yet, but it can be filed any day, and then we only have 20 days to make any type of appeal of their decision. I felt that we need to take some action to protect our ordinances. We as a committee have reviewed language around the EMCs. During the process, the city attorney was contacted by myself and the mayor, actually, and he did give sort of an opinion the first part of which said how the Zoning Board of Appeals has some latitude in how they interpret ordinances, and then the second in how he didn't necessarily feel there was something called a changeable sign that could be issued. He also repeated the fact that he wasn't sure if it went forward, if he would be able to, who he would be able to represent. He might have to represent the Zoning Board of Appeals, whether the building inspector appealed or the city council wanted to appeal their decision. So that's still a little bit up in the air. He related the fact that if the building inspector or the council did pursue it, again, he may have a conflict. Given that fact, that the ZBA decision appears to be in conflict with our intent of the council, and we're approved, that where we approved the sign ordinance, I feel we should pursue it, getting a formal legal opinion with regard to this. And there is provisions for that under Mass General Law 48, Section 17, that a city board may even be provided independent counsel to pursue another board's decision if it went to court. But I don't think we should pursue it if we don't have a solid legal basis to pursue it under. So what I have proposed, or what I would like to propose, is a amendment that would allow us, or a vote tonight that we would allow, again, given that there's 20 days, we may not have another city council meeting before this matter would come up for a possible appeal. And I wanted to, and I put it in the form of a motion, but what I would like to do is authorize the city council president, in consultation with the mayor, to pursue a formal legal opinion in this matter with the city attorney with regard to the Zoning Board of Appeals decision to grant the appeal of the building inspector on the electronic sign in Northampton Street, and that if the city attorney has a conflict in providing that opinion, the city council authorizes the city council president to pursue an opinion from outside counsel. And further, it would authorize the council president to pursue this appeal in court within the 20-day window of appeal if he receives a legal opinion that states a substantial chance of prevailing. So this is kind of what I would like the council to approve tonight, to give us the opportunity to at least seek a formal legal opinion of whether we're on substantial grounds to appeal this decision.
Was that a formal motion?
I didn't make it in a formal motion yet, but that will be essentially what the motion is going to state. And I'm certainly open to changing the motion. That's why I didn't put it in the form of a motion.
Councilor Rist.
Well, first of all, I think having the council president pursue this is probably the only way we're going to get it done within the 20-day window, should the council want to do it. With regard to the action itself, I'm in total agreement with Councilor Hagan, because I remember that this ordinance was difficult and it was controversial, but we all felt, or at least the majority of us felt, that having these kinds of changeable signs on Northampton Street, with a lot of them propping up, would turn us into a Vegas-like street, and which is an extreme, I guess, interpretation. But I find it interesting that the building inspector interpreted the ordinance as we saw it. In other words, he felt that the council's intention was not to allow these signs. He didn't need to come to us to ask for clarity. Since then, though, our planner, in reading the language, noticed that it has some ambiguity, to say the least, and we've sent it to our ordinance committee for review because of that. Now, should the permit move forward and this sign be erected, then our hands are tied. How could we deny future signs? Maybe we could gauge an ordinance that would allow the signs in the future to be, carefully monitored or carefully dealt with, but we would not have the authority to deal with this current sign. And I'd like to give our ordinance committee time to re-debate the issue and write the language without having a sign put up without us first discussing it. So I think this motion is in order because we need to find out if we can, in a injunctive way, prevent this from moving forward so that our council and our committee can deal with it. So I'd like the council to consider moving forward with this, and I hope that we do have legal grounds. As I said, I find it interesting that both the city attorney and the building inspector found our intent quite clear on it, although the language is ambiguous, which leaves the door open to other legal interpretation, which is what we're trying to fix. So that's my comment on it.
I believe I was on ordinance with Counselor Derby, so I'd like to hear his impression on this as well.
So, well, I think, so far up to this point, I think maybe the other counselors that weren't involved maybe don't even know exactly what's being discussed here. And I think, Councilor Riss, there was a little, I agree with your sentiment, but it's a little bit misleading. We're not talking about Vegas-type signs here. We're talking about a sign for a gas station to put up the cost of their gasoline, as we've seen pretty much every other surrounding community. They've done with LED, energy-efficient lights, and so which is becoming the industry standard, which is why Mobile, I think, is trying to put up the sign and trying to do this. And so, yeah, I think I don't agree with the slippery slope, and I think that this is probably something that it's at the end of the day, the only argument against this is an aesthetic, and I have a really hard time spending the taxpayers' money on specific counselors' aesthetic, whims. At this point, that's exactly what it is. It's aesthetics. It's what is the perceived character, and whether it's an old kind of dingy looking lit sign or a new energy efficient lit sign, that's up to debate, and that's aesthetics. And I don't personally agree with spending taxpayer money to try to stop something that is basically, at the end of the day, aesthetics. It's going to be displaying the cost of gas. So that's all I have to say on it. And, actually, no, I have something else to say. When we did we basically anticipated that this was going to be what was coming down the line. And so we tried to provide for it for electronic signage. And I think scrolling signage and digital billboards, those are a totally different thing, and those don't fit the character of Easthampton. But it was a very close call. If I remember correctly, it was not, it wasn't a super majority that was against having these LED signs to display the cost of gasoline. And I think anybody that's driven through other communities that have them aren't, extremely put off by them. They're not, that materially different than the lit up signs that you have to manually change, really. So,
Councilor Riss?
Well, I actually don't disagree totally with it, although I don't think it isn't a necessarily aesthetic issue. What you're saying is true with regard to gasoline signs. I do feel until the ordinance is carefully reviewed, again, maybe we will as a council decide, okay, these are okay, as opposed to, as you say, the billboards. But I don't believe the language in the ordinance now is clear enough as to the two different possible signs. And I simply don't want our hands tied saying, okay, now these are allowed, before we look at it and make a decision. It was clear, although you're right, it wasn't a supermajority, it was a majority. The ordinance passed, and we didn't allow these signs. And you may be right. In your opinion, it's aesthetic. I don't agree, but we did pass this ordinance with a majority of the council feeling that we should review it now, okay? But we didn't want them. And I don't think the planning board should overrule us until we have a chance to do that. That's what this does. And if we allow this to move forward, I believe it sets the precedent, although maybe it's happened before, I don't know, that the planning board can decide zoning board, excuse me, forgive me, the zoning board can make these kinds of judgments over and above our ordinances. So I'm concerned about that, and I think it's time that we set a precedent, and I don't think it's wrong for us to spend the money to do that. I disagree that it's simply an aesthetic. It's about process. It's about deciding, do we want these now or not, and your committee will deal with that as it should. But that process should not have its hands tied. Once it's up, we can't deny anybody else, and then the interpretation of what a changeable sign might lead to the slippery slope of billboards if we don't deal with it.
Councilor Hagan.
That's all I'm going to say.
I would just reiterate a little what Councilor Rist is saying in that going back and reviewing the minutes of those council debates, gas signs specifically came up, so it was very clear. And I do agree with what Councilor Derby said. I believe it was I want to say it was a 5-4 vote on whether we did or did not allow it, but it was a 5-4. I mean, it was a majority vote. And again, I think a lot of it goes to now what to upholding the integrity of the council, what we intended. Again, I know at the time Councilor Derby was against him. He obviously is still. But again, it's more than whether you're for or against that particular type of sign. I think this is whether you're for upholding the council or not, or at least getting a legal opinion of whether we could uphold what we thought was the intent of the council. So I guess that would be my, and I hope that the other councils would prevail and at least give us a chance, or the president a chance to get a formal legal opinion from whether it's the city attorney or an outside counsel. And again, I'm probably one of the last that likes to spend money up here on this board, but there are times that money has to be appropriated, and if that is this case, again, I would only pursue this in a court where you would be raking up if we really felt, and that's why I would put in my motion and did put in my motion that if we got a legal opinion back, that we would have a substantially, or at least a very good chance of prevailing with our appeal. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I sort of feel, as Councilor Durbury does on some level, that I think most of us would be comfortable with gas signs changing electronically. But right now, as I understand it, those signs are grouped all under electronic messaging, which to me seems a huge description that would be a wide range of possibilities. Certainly, I think probably as the ordinance will do, I think that needs to be probably further qualified as far as where the gas signs fits in versus maybe a much larger electronic messaging system. I guess I would be in favor of the ordinance the motion that Councilor Hagan will make, just to give the council and myself some flexibility, as he said, to find out what our legal ramifications are, what are, sort of like a two-prong approach here. I think ordinance should work on further clarifying those signs versus gas signs, but I would like the flexibility to be able to respond to an appeal if we feel it's necessary. And that would be my opinion. Councilor Derby.
I think it seems reasonable, and I'm not an unreasonable person. I'm just curious, do we have any idea of how many hours we would be billed? Any sort of ballpark cost estimate?
I don't. I think that's why I would like to see the council president, and I would put in here in consultation with the mayor, because the mayor may have to be part of, if we have to go to outside counsel, part of that process. And I think, if nothing else, the city attorney, whether he feels he can or can't give us that opinion, I think could at least give us his opinion of what an appeal like this might cost from an outside counsel. I mean, again, I know attorneys can have a wide range depending who you go to, so that would be something else I would hope that the city attorney could at least, if he felt he's conflicted and couldn't provide us with that he could give us a list of attorneys and their reasonable fees and again, that's kind of why I wanted to leave it a little bit open-ended with the council president to kind of make that type of determination for the benefit of the city.
Mr. President, one other thing. Did we, Was the zoning board of appeals notified that this was going to be brought to the full council's attention? And did we give them a chance to talk about their decision-making process?
They have not filed a decision yet, I believe. Is that correct?
No.
Clerk? Yeah, we don't have a file, so there is no opinion on record as of yet, but because of the short time period once a decision is rendered, and the holidays approaching, we felt the ability to have a little more flexibility. Councilor Hagan?
Just as a clarification, I attended all the zoning board of appeal hearings, and they were well aware of, at least from what this counselor said, and they were provided with minutes of the city council meetings and what our intent was. Also a letter from city attorney Fitzgibbon. So I think they're well aware that at least one counselor, myself, was not particularly going to agree with their decision. And again, what President McCoy is saying is this decision could be filed any day. It has to be written up before the 20-day clock starts, but it could start tomorrow, and we would even hit another meeting before that 20-day window would close on us for any possible, searching on an appeal.
So clarification, if I may. So they rendered a decision and just not written that decision?
Correct.
So a decision has been rendered?
Yes.
Okay.
They just haven't given us a written copy of that decision until they provide that written copy.
Which starts the clock.
Which also has information in there, at least in the file, which I still haven't received from the assistant planner, which I've asked for, is there's, I believe, a letter from Mr. Roberts, or Roberts is the one that owns the mobile station up there. They had a legal opinion in there too, so I kind of had wanted to get a look at that. Or it would also be something that would be provided, whether it's the city attorney or an outside attorney, what that opinion is. And again, it would probably be a good gauge for a legal opinion of what our chance of prevailing.
I think I have that.
Right, you may.
Councilor Hayes first.
Well, it sounds like if this is going to be a decision that sets precedent, then it makes all the sense in the world to have somebody take a look at it to make sure that the way the ordinance is written is clear. That's all I wanted to say.
Councilor Riss?
I just wanted to say, I tend to feel that as all legal proceedings happen, that if we get a good legal opinion that says we do have grounds for an appeal, that perhaps we have negotiating leverage, that we don't spend money in court. We go back to the zoning board, Councilor Derby, Councilor Hagan, and we find a way to write the language. I, for one, would consider language that allowed those type of signs, so long as there is it's carefully vetted. It's not simply that, oh, it's going to be the same as other signs. I don't think we should just negate the possibility of the slippery slope to different types of scrolling signs. So perhaps, and I'm hopeful for this, that once the president acts on this, that we get a chance to say, wait a minute, let's try to get the ordinance written in such a way that this can happen in a good process. This is something I thought of. I don't know.
Additional comments, questions? Councilor Winnie, do you have any insights that you were over here during the whole ordinance?
I think in hindsight, with the digital signs starting to become just on the forefront of becoming popular, we may have maybe been fortuitous or not to maybe put some language in the ordinances concerning specific signs and the sizes of them. I think looking at it from a safety perspective, which I'm sure Roberts is looking at it as, they don't want, their employees climbing up on a sign to change the numbers. And the way that the gas prices have been changing from hour to hour, never mind daily to daily, I could see why they would want to go to something like that. But for us to go back and look at the ordinances and to bring it up to date with what's really happening now, and what, we don't have the crystal ball, so we don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now and what the technology is going to be. We can only go from what the technology is from now and what we're seeing. But I don't think that it would be a bad idea. I don't think that something, having a sign pertaining to changing the gas prices electronically is necessarily the intent of what our ordinances that we put in place were. I mean, our ordinances, I visualize it as being, you know, those big flashing signs, those arrows and, you know, come on in here and things like that, neon signs. So I think we could maybe go back and look at our ordinances and to maybe define it a little bit better and refine it to maybe bring it in closer to what our businesses are looking for. Does that make any sense?
And I have actually an add-on. Two things. We do allow big neon signs, number one. And number two, just so everybody knows, the ordinance committee is reviewing this right now.
Right.
So this is in our committee. And I believe that the reason this is in our committee was the impetus for this was this.
Yes.
So so we are reviewing it right now. So that prong has already been started. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that.
Again, and that was my point as far as maybe as like a as we said, a two-pronged approach. Ordinance is working on the language to see if it needs to be refined, clarified. But again, just to have a flexibility to at least investigate what our council options are in relating to this. And obviously, myself and Vice President and Councilor Hagan will all certainly keep in mind any kind of financial, like, no, that's just too much or whatever. But again, just allow the council a little flexibility in looking at this topic during the holiday break. Did you get more, Councilor Hagan?
No.
Okay. Okay, Councilor Hagan, I guess you have a motion.
I'll make the following motion, that the Easthampton City Council authorize the council president in consultation with the mayor to pursue a formal legal opinion with the city attorney with regard to the zoning board of appeals decision to grant an appeal of the building inspector by the applicant for an electronic sign on Northampton Street, and further that if the city attorney has a conflict in providing this opinion, the city council authorizes the council president to pursue an opinion from outside counsel, and further would authorize the council president to pursue this appeal in court within the 20-day window of appeal if he receives a legal opinion that states a substantial chance of prevailing.
Second. Okay, a motion, a second. You all heard the motion. I can't repeat it, obviously, without saying it. Councilor Winnie.
Well, I have a question. So, just following the timeline, and so the zoning board of appeals overruled our building inspector's opinion of the changing of the prices. Is that what this was?
Yes,
The sign, to update the sign so that they can electronically change the prices of
right.
the fuel.
The building inspector felt it fell under electronic messaging center. All electronic signs like that fell under electronic messaging center. He refused to issue a building permit. They overruled him twice. They applied for a special permit. They kind of got the applicant to withdraw the special permit and then had an appeal hearing of the building inspector's decision. Again, they also had the opportunity to continue this. They didn't have to issue it, this appeal. They heard it the night of the appeal and issued their ruling that night because the current chair of that committee is not going to be there in January and wanted to get the business off their agenda. And they moved it through with very little other than myself and Robert's. They moved it right to an opinion, which was just last Thursday night. And the chair, if I take her at her word, while she has many days to issue a written opinion, said she would file it sometime this week, meaning this week. It hasn't obviously been filed yet, but I think that's the emergency necessity of at least getting our own legal opinion.
So did the zoning board of appeal, when they overruled the second time the building inspector's ruling, did they give the reasons why they felt that this was not a messaging center as opposed to something else? Did they give an opinion that night?
Yes, they gave an opinion throughout the whole process, Councilor Winnie, there's a one definition in the, in just the definition. It's not a type of sign, not a type of allowed sign. There's a definition called a changeable sign, in which a sign can be changed either manually or remotely. And it's only by definition in the ordinance, and that was their opinion, that this was a changeable sign, and therefore did not need to be an electronic messaging center. That was in conflict with what the building inspector said,
So do we have that language in our ordinances as a changeable sign?
as a definition.
As opposed to a messaging sign?
Let me clarify this. A messaging sign is a permitted sign. A changeable sign is a definition in the glossary of definitions that says changeable sign. That's
why we need to review the
that's the
ordinance.
that's the only mention of changeable sign, is a definition of a changeable sign. There is no, under table 10.1, I believe it is, of permitted signs, there is no such thing as a changeable sign. There's only electronic messaging sign.
So this is where it goes back to refining and redefining and, okay.
I have a
Counselor Smith.
question. I guess from hearing what everyone is saying, I'm not sure if we're saying that the city council is seeking the right to overrule the appeal that the zoning board of appeals has granted. And we're doing so, this is the part that I need more clarification. If we're all saying that we're okay with that sign and gas station signs, I don't understand the difference between allowing this to go and then in the conversations that ordinance is having, make that language clear that an LED sign for the purpose of a gas station from this point forward will be called such and such, versus having this go, and the ambiguity and the disagreement between what a changeable sign is and an electronic moving sign is. I just want to be sure I'm understanding what exactly it is I'm voting on here. The right for the city council to have the final say, and the right for the city council to seek legal opinion in any case, or only when there's enough ambiguity that we're like, I don't understand why you made that decision. And that's an important distinction to me.
I'll start, and I know Councilor Hagan probably, my understanding is that when we're doing this ordinance, right now, all we have is electronic messaging system. I think the concern is if that this appeal is not challenged, or this decision is not challenged, the definition of electronic messaging system may be quite broad and may send us into types of signage that most of us aren't comfortable. When this ordinance was created, there certainly was a level of glitz and repetitiveness that we weren't comfortable with. So I think that my concern, and I can't speak for everyone, is that right now the way the ZBA decision is that that would potentially lead for quite a bit of. So I think that would be, while it is being fine-tuned in ordinance, the flexibility to challenge it, it looks like if we accept it under that definition, then what other signage may be available, as I understand it. Now, Councilor Rist, did you want?
I just want to say to your question, yes, I might be in favor of this kind of a sign in the future, but right now we have so much ambiguity as to whether it's a changeable sign or whether it's a messaging system. We have not defined it at all. We're going to allow this first sign to be put up with its own definition, such as how bright is it? How big is it? How often can it change? Can it blink to tell you that, oh, I have the lowest price for gas? Can that happen? Well, that's why we have an ordinance committee, and we are very, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor Derby, but we are very detailed about the size of signs and where they can go, et cetera, and we're going to be detailed about this. If we're going to do it, we need to vet it. And I'm not in favor of allowing this now before we take a look at it, because I don't want, for instance, a sign that blinks its price every 20 seconds so that everybody going by sees that and their head's distracted. I don't know, maybe that sounds extreme, but I think we need language in an ordinance to prevent that, because somebody might think that that's okay. Maybe it's already there, but to me, we need a process. The process isn't, we're just going to allow it and let the owner of the business determine the first sign that goes up and how it's going to be built. Councilor Derby.
So just a little clarification. So all of the parameters for the size of the sign are laid out very specifically. As far as the content of the sign, because they're not trying to get a sign under the electronic messaging center, because that's prohibited. they can't have an electronic messaging center. So they're trying to, and what the ZBA has given them, and correct me if I'm wrong because I wasn't at the meetings, has given them a provision under the auspice of the changeable sign. Now, changeable sign, if you think about, and the reason changeable sign is in here is because, I don't know, for years McDonald's had in front of it a big lit up sign that had like, it kind of was like an old carnival sign, an arrow, and they put messages on it. That's not there anymore. That was a changeable sign. You could go out and change the letters on it, change the message on it. Now, so within this, they would be prohibited from displaying any sort of message. The only place in the city of Easthampton that can have any sort of message or image is the industrial zone, and the mixed industrial zone. So like Eastworks, and that was kind of under the, when we passed this, we allowed one district to have the electronic message center because that was something that they were considering at the time. We thought, to help the mills, that would be something that would be okay. So all of those things are very clearly stated. They would not be able to put in, our gas is the cheapest in big bright letters that are going to distract. And in our ordinance it says really clearly, it's under 10.04 general standards, a sign or its illumination shall not by reason of its location, shape, color interfere with traffic or be confused with or obstruct view of effectiveness of any official traffic sign. So they wouldn't be able to do that. But what they would be able to do if this appeal went forward, would they be able to put up a sign that had illuminated prices of gas, I'm imagining. And just to be clear again, the ordinance subcommittee is working on this right now, and
And I just want to give you time to do that. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
Anyway,
additional comments,
we have a
questions?
motion on the floor, Mr. President.
Yeah, and this, any more comments or questions? Okay, so this is the motion that Councilor Hagan said. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstain?
Yeah, it's
I'm abstaining.
All right.
Is that-
No.
We're missing one.
1, 2, positive?
Aye.
Yes.
2, 3, 4, 5. 5, we have enough.
I'm just sorry, just for a roll call. Not a roll call vote, just for the record then.
It's the first one this year. Salem Derby.
No, thank you.
Dan Hagan.
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes.
Yes.
Joe McCoy.
Yes.
Dan Rist.
Yes.
Tamara Smith.
Abstain.
Joy Winnie.
Abstain.
Nathan Ziegler.
Yes.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 5 yeses, 1 no, 2 abstentions.
Still
Motion
So
passes.
passes.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, I will
Make a
keep you,
motion to close.
I will keep you all apprised of how this proceeds. Okay, I guess we're finally done, so I'll entertain a motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Second? Okay, all those in favor?